Okay, welcome back, and we are looking at our session number 9 today, which is basically the Karma Mimamsa, as the title of the system of philosophy. Basically, it's about the theory of karma that we are going to review and see the understanding behind it. So this is basically the questions. So the questions we are answering today are related to what we call as action and reaction, karma. Definition, doubts, applications, etc. of what is popularly known as the theory of karma. So this is the agenda for today. But before we come to the agenda, we'll also see just an overall summary of whatever we have been doing, so that whatever connections are supposed to be there in these topics would be clear within you. So there is a lot of ground to cover. So today, okay. So I start by talking about how this whole theory of karma is basically trying to address the question of responsibility. Okay, so the question is responsibility. The whole question is, who is responsible? As in, for whatever happens in, people's lives in general. Who is responsible? That's the question we are basically trying to answer. This question is important because several times people tend to accuse. One of the reasons for atheism is also that people see a lot of so-called injustice in the world, right? And people feel that there are so many people with whom so much of injustice is happening. So there's no question of any God or any of that stuff. So that means, in general, people tend to put the responsibility of whatever is happening here onto that God, saying that is a uska khel hai, uska kartut hai, he has done all this stuff, right? And if he's doing all this, then there's no question of really accepting him or something like that, right? So this is one of the reasons, if you carefully observe. So I just want to start by talking about what I call as three approaches. Okay, so just like you have theism, you have something called as deism. So these are all standard terms related to, I'll explain it briefly. And you also have what's called as atheism. So these are three different, there could be many more, but I'm beginning with talking about three approaches, okay? And the question here is about God and about control. That means about, who controls basically. So if you see carefully from the atheistic perspective, obviously there's no God and neither is anyone controlling anything. So basically, it's just, whatever is happening because of individual responsibility, or it is happening in some random way, as in, random chance, that kind of a thing. There's something called deism, I'll talk about that briefly, where they do feel that there is a God, but they don't feel that he's in charge. Whereas in theism, they talk about both. So these are three different approaches. So I'll just take three people and talk about them. So this is Charles Darwin, and he clearly, besides the evolutionary theory that he propagated, from a philosophical stance, he actually stood for atheism. And in fact, that was the motivating factor which made him feel that I need to search something, answers to life. I don't want to hear the stuff which I hear from the church, so that was one motivation why he did what he did. However, so this is well known. Everybody knows what this is. There is something called as deism. What I'm showing you is a very, very famous bestseller in America. This is written by a Jewish rabbi, a Jewish priest. His name was Arnold Kushner, and the book he wrote was When Bad Things Happen to Good People. This is a book written by him, very famous book. He wrote this book when he was a priest all his life, and it so happened that his son was born with one particular genetic disorder related to aging, where the child ages very quickly. So that means it's like even when he's 10-year-old, he's like 50, 60-year-old in terms of age of body. And by age of 20, such children die of old age. That's called premature aging. So there is a disease. It's a genetic disorder. Happens rarely, 1 in a million or whatever. So his son had this issue. So when he underwent that whole experience of his son, looking at his son, born with this disease and dying, and he himself having been a rabbi means a Jewish priest all his life, he felt that perhaps there is a God, but there is nothing in his hand. He is not doing anything actually. Right? So that's the stance that he took basically. And his book actually became pretty popular. That's what I have, that's why I have shown the cover page of his book. This was in the 1980s, but it was a very famous book in America. And in fact, this title is also very famous, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. So the title says a lot about what he wants to cover. Okay, so that is what we call as deism. There's another thing though, which is called as theism. And for that I have another character over here. You may not know this person. He's a very famous Arthur Ashe. He's the only black to have won the Wimbledon in 1970s. I think 76 or 77 he won the Wimbledon. So he's the only black who has ever won. And also he won the other Grand Slams, US Open and French Open, etc. Very famous player of the late 70s, early 80s. He was like our present day Nadal or whatever, right? Famous guy. However, a very interesting thing happened in his life where in 1982 or 83, he had an accident, or rather actually he had a heart transplant, and in the blood transfusion process he contracted HIV and he died at the age of 42 or something in 1993. So before his death, because he was a very well-known man in America and very famous actually, won presidential gold medals and all that stuff. So he was actually asked his opinion about God in one very famous interview. So he remarked by saying something amazing. He said that, so the interviewer asked him a question as to, see, you believe in all this God and all this stuff. See what happened to you, such bad luck. You got HIV by blood transfusion and you're about to die. What do you got to say about this stuff? So he responded by saying that, look here my friend, every year in America or all over the world, there are several million children who start playing tennis. And generally out of that, around 50,000 people start playing professional tennis. 5,000 of them enter competitions. Hardly 100 or 200 enter Grand Slam events. 4 enter semi-final, 2 enter final, 1 picks the cup up. When I picked the cup, I never asked the question, why God gave only me this opportunity to pick this cup. So today again I have no right to ask this question, why only I got this HIV? I am only responsible for it, so it's fine. So it was a very famous answer before his death, which he gave in an interview. But that basically indicates, I'm just giving these three, famous Europeans actually. All three of them are very famous, though perhaps some of you may know only Darwin among the three, but even this guy was very famous. Even that Arnold Kushner, very famous person. So this is basically the theistic approach. Okay, so this is something like what we are actually going to touch on today. The theory of karma and the logic behind it. So that's what we are going to see. I hope that it will be a very interesting session though. Okay, so now we'll just do some review of what we have been looking at and try to summarize some things before I start the topic. So there are 5 topics actually in some way or the other that come in these philosophies that we are dealing in this course. For example, we have dealt a lot with this concept of Atma and the mind, etc. We have made a lot of focus on that. We have also briefly spoken on the material world by talking in terms of the psychology, the 3 modes. That is actually the analysis of this. Karma is what I'm going to talk on today. Time is something that's yet to come. And God is some concept that we spoke last time in the Vedanta, when I spoke about the monotheism, polytheism and all that stuff. So these are 5 topics that we are speaking on. So now before I start off, I want to once again connect all these 5 topics before I start. Because we have been looking at various topics in isolation, but I want to make some connection so that the understanding, at least we try to get what this philosophy is talking about. Yeah. So one question that perhaps we have not spoken of is the origin of the soul itself. Where does it come from and where does it go to? This topic somehow we have not touched on. So I'll just start with this briefly because this is related to the theory of karma, and then I will go ahead with the theory of karma. So in order to explain this topic, rather than talking from karma mimamsa, I'll take a story from actually the Bible and talk about a very famous story which is narrated by Jesus. So he speaks about the story called as the story of the prodigal son. Okay, so the story of prodigal son is like this. So there was a rich man who had several children, and because he was rich, all his children were also enjoying. They were having a good time in life. However, one of his children fell into some kind of bad company, and his friends basically, in some way, they influenced him. And they told him that, why are you always staying with your parents? You take the share of your property and you can make it on your own. You need not simply keep hanging around on your father like this. So taking their advice very seriously, this boy goes to his father and tells that I want my share of property because I don't want to stay with you like this. I want to try it out myself in life. So because he's a young boy, the father advises him that better you don't do that. In fact, you would fall into trouble. But he says, no, I am very convinced that I can make it on my own. I don't need your help. Thanks. So seeing that the son is pretty adamant, the father has no choice but to sign off some property and say that, okay, take it and go. Try your luck out. Needless to say, this boy who takes the property and walks off, in a few years, he loses everything because he falls into some kind of wrong company, blows all the money out, and he is, on the street. Now, when he's on the street, he is wandering here and there, and he's wondering how to live, basically, how to get food. So he takes employment under some rich man. Now, this rich man who is there, he makes him take care of the horses. And he also tells him that as far as your salary is concerned, you take care of the horses, and whatever food you are giving the horses, you can eat that also yourself, and that's it. So basically, you just can live, that's all. So this boy does that. After doing this for some time, this boy starts to feel that, my God, this master is so horrible, the way he treats me. My father had so many servants at home and he treated them pretty well actually. He gave them good food, gave them good money. I would go back to my father and take employment under him so that at least I can have a better standard of life than what I'm undergoing. So then he goes back to his father, and the story ends by stating that the father was actually happy to welcome the son back as a son and not as a servant at home. So basically, that's how the story of the prodigal son ends, where the illusioned child tries its luck out somewhere in the world and then ultimately comes back to him. So this is a very, now this is again, the theme behind the story is what is common in all religious philosophies, where everybody talks about the same thing. Just that the nomenclature changes. The nomenclature. Like if you remember last time I made this point that the same sun, somebody calls as sun, somebody calls as Surya. But ultimately it is a sun only being addressed. So similarly, here also, the analogy is very simple and straight. The analogy is that there is a place of God which is actually considered the world of spirit, where the soul actually lives in its natural state. But for some reason he comes to this world in order to try to see whether he can be the central enjoyer figure. But when he feels that he has had enough of this attempt, he wishes to go back. And when he goes back, he again goes back into his own realm. Okay, so this is the theme actually. This is the broad theme which everybody talks about. Just that they talk different names. Like for example, in Bible they call the kingdom of God as paradise, whereas the Hindu philosophies call it as Vaikuntha. So the title is different, but the concept is the same. The concept is basically of the soul coming to this world, searching for happiness and trying to go back. So that's how the concept is. Okay, so I'll not talk about this more. So there are some diagrams that you can see later. So anyway, so yeah, so why does he come here? He basically comes here to try to see whether he can have a good time. So basically there are some examples given as well for this. Why does he come here? So this is very simple example, because somebody may say, if he's happy there, why should he come here? Okay. The answer to that is, even if when a person is happy, a person feels perhaps I'll try something else out and see whether that works. So this is another example given in the philosophy. The example is that a child is there. A child is very happily sitting with the parent. But when the parent is starting a fire, the child says, I want to put my hand in the fire. Because the child has never experienced what fire is. The mother says, no, don't put your hand inside. It will burn you actually. But the child says, no, let me try it out once. Let me try once and see how it actually is. So the mother generally says, okay, try a little bit. Then once he puts his finger a little bit close to the fire and gets a sensation of being burnt, for the entire life he will never put his hand again. Because once he has to undergo that experience of understanding what is actually the pain of fire, which otherwise perhaps he doesn't understand. So this is something like that, where he wants to try to be the central figure and enjoyer, right? So basically this is another example given, a simple example though, that just like a daughter sometimes insists to the mother that I want to cook today, and because she's a small girl she cannot actually cook. So the mother says, okay, no problem. She gives him an entire toy kitchen set, and the daughter is busy the whole day cooking in some imaginary kitchen with some imaginary vessels and that gas stove, the small red one, everything she does. But finally when she's hungry, she has to go to the mother only for food. So the idea is, the world of matter which is there is given to the souls to see how much they could exploit it and have fun. Basically it's like, you just try to see whether you can get something out of it. When a person is convinced that I have had enough of whatever fun I wanted, or then he thinks that how I could kind of think of my way back. So that's how it explains. And this is pretty so that's why again the world in general is, if you see it very, if you see it from a very realistic perspective, other than the way they show in Bollywood or in some movie where they show the world as a extremely jolly place where people are having a lot of fun. If you actually see very closely, most people undergo, or almost everybody has to undergo various kind of tribulations, which is what it is. Because of which actually, not only in the Indian philosophy, but philosophies world over compare the world to a place of punishment, a reformation. Just like if somebody is building a city, along with making various buildings, theaters, hospitals, colleges, stadium, mall, blah blah, all this stuff, they also make a prison. So they make a prison because some people need, actually the purpose of prison, please remember, is not just punishment. It is actually rectification, so that you improve yourself. If you know anything about the logic of a prison, the prison is not to punish people. That's one part of it. But actually it's to help people come out of their wrong ideas in life, so they can just be natural like everybody else. So this is how the world is generally seen, as a place of punishment. And if you remember, I'm just trying to connect everything that we saw earlier. If you remember, we had seen about, these 4 things that everybody has to undergo, called birth, death, old age, disease, repeatedly, which is not a very fantastic idea, basically. And especially if you have to go over it again and again, it's not considered great. Besides this, there are also several other issues, like miseries from one's own mind, or miseries from other living entities. We've just shown some mosquito or some creature, because nowadays there's a lot of dengue, chikungunya going around. And also miseries from various natural calamities or problems which are in general there. Right? So these are all in general considered as some form of punishment. The price you pay to stay here in the world. But more important than this is a purification, which is yoga, which I'm going to talk tomorrow actually, the yoga part. Yeah, so the first thing when a person comes to prison, like for example, he changes his clothes. So there are so many bodies which are all compared to clothes which a person gets. And similarly, there are chains as well. And the chains are the three gunas that we spoke of. They are considered as chains because once someone identifies with one of these or a combination of them, one is forced to act in those ways. That means one is forced to act by one's own nature. Hence, that is called as a chain. So this is anyway just a background to understand whatever we spoke till now. So this is all covered. So now we actually come to the theme today, that is the theory of karma. So I'll start with the session actually at this point. Okay. So what is actually this karma, which we hear about, or which the karma mimamsa talks of? I have told this again many times, but I'm just emphasizing once again that I am actually giving a very brief overview of these philosophies. So please don't in any way think that I'm doing a very comprehensive job. There's no way I can do that with whatever limited time we have. In 20 hours, we are covering 6 philosophies, so you can imagine. So I'm just touch and go. I'm just trying to summarize everything in just 2 or 3 hours. That's what I'm trying to do, right? So let's try to understand the theory of karma. Okay. The first thing to state about the theory of karma is that karma literally basically means action. Okay. That means I perform some action, and because I perform an action, there is a reaction, which is pretty similar to what we all study in physics in the Newton's third law, right? To every action, there is an equal and corresponding reaction. You get a reaction back for every action. It's pretty similar here. Okay. Now, some question that obviously comes when we talk about karma is, what is the difference between, or the free will of a person and destiny? You understand this? Like, one accusation against Indian philosophy, which many Europeans have put against the theory of karma, and I would say it's because of not understanding it properly, is the Indian philosophy has been seen by people as fatalistic. You understand what is fatalistic? Fatalism means to think that जो होगा वो होगा ही, जो होना है वो तो होगा ही, तो हम प्रयास करके क्या होगा? That kind of thinking. You understood this? That is called in English as fatalism. Fatalism basically means to think that something is going to happen, it will happen. If I have to fail in the exam, I will fail. If I should not get a job, I will not get. So what is the use of my doing? No, people, I would say that perhaps many people in India also have misunderstood the karma principle and have thought it to be like this. In fact, I'll come to this theme. You see this theme in Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, you see this theme because whenever Vidur is telling Dhritarashtra that give the kingdom back to the Pandavas, let's avoid the war, Dhritarashtra's answer is always fatalistic. He says that if my sons have to die, they will die. What can I do about it? जो होना है वो तो हो गए. So why should I give it back? That was his thought process. Anyway, if it is going to happen, if my sons are going to die, they are going to die. If the other party is going to die, they will die. Somebody will die. So it's okay. Whatever is happening, let it happen. I will not interfere. This was his thought. You understood? But as we talk in today's session, we will understand that that is actually the worst possible understanding of karma. That's not what karma is addressing. So I'm just first of all trying to tell you what it is not before going to what it is. Okay, then the question is, what is karma? Okay, so the answer in one line, which I will obviously keep elaborating, is actions in general, okay, actions lead to an environment. Okay, that means whenever anybody does any action, that leads to an environment or a situation. You understood? Environment or a situation. Simple example. You work hard, you study very nicely, that's an action. There's a situation that comes because of that. You get good marks in your grade sheet. That's a situation. Something like that. Right? So actions lead to a environment. And in an environment, once you are in an environment, you choose to perform the next set of actions, to do the next set of actions. And what do they give? So when you choose to do a next set of actions in the new environment that you landed in, this new set of actions that you do in this particular new environment which you got from your previous action, it leads to another environment. It leads to yet another environment, right? Because basically that means it's same thing. And there is another environment you again choose to act in certain ways, right? And then it goes on. So basically there is an environment in which we are at any given point of time. In that environment we choose to act. Our actions lead an environment. So what is the karma over here? The karma, can anybody tell me where is the karma in this picture? What is actually the karma that we are talking of? Yeah, choose to do. This is actually your action, and this is actually what we call as your free will. You know, free will as in you choose to do something. And these things, when they lead to an environment, this lead which you say, this is what is actually seen as the reaction. So this is an action and this is the reaction. And basically, right, this is actually the karma part of it. That means my previous actions give a new situation or environment, which is actually what is karma. Okay, so we will explain. So this is a very simplistic understanding, but we are going to talk about it in some detail. Okay, so right, so one thing is, you will agree that the world, is everybody getting the same environment or situation to work in? I mean, even in the world around us where we are living, does everybody work in a similar environment or situation? No, not really, right? People's environment and situation is very different. And that's what we typically in English language call as background. Everybody's background is different. I mean, even if you're sitting in the same class, actually all of you are not coming from the same backgrounds. In the sense of whatever environment you have come from. The kind of parents you had, the kind of money you have seen at home, the kind of relationships you have had, the kind of education you had. By education, I just don't mean, the marks you scored or something. The kind of concepts you really learnt in life from whichever teachers you had or you didn't. Right? All these things put together is the environment. And this environment is different for different people. So now the environment, why it is different? Obviously, without the theory of karma, it is random. It's just there's no real reason as to why it is different. In fact, environment is not only referring to that. Environment also refers to your skills and abilities. Like somebody is a very brainy guy in the sense. I mean, again, I don't want to say brainy only in the sense of studies, but somebody is a linguist. Somebody has an ability to pick up languages very well. Somebody has an ability to perhaps do math very nicely. Somebody has an ability to communicate very effectively. You understood? Like sometimes you see a salesman. He really talks so good. He can really present the product so nicely. The technical engineer, he cannot present it that way. He is just an engineer, that's all. He designed it, but he doesn't know how to present it to the world. But another guy who has that ability. It's actually a skill which he has, which is environment. His body basically, which it is. You understood this? So this environment is different for different people. And this environment, the theory of karma sees this as a result of a set of previous actions, which is given this new environment. Okay. So please note here, karma doesn't decide what happens to you. That means there is nothing like, ye nahi hai. It's not like that. Karma basically gives an environment. In that environment, what you do decides your next environment. It's like that. Okay, so to give a simple example for this, let us say two people are sitting in an aeroplane that is flying from Mumbai to New York. Once the plane has taken off, one thing is very clear, that both of them have to get down in New York only. That's decided. That's the karma part, where there is an environment that is now binding on both of them. But in the plane, they have choice. One could make friendship with some businessman and expand a business. Another could, tease the air hostess and land in jail in New York. Kind of do some eve teasing and, land up in New York jail when he gets down. Police will be waiting for him to arrest him and take him inside. So basically, in every environment, what you do is your next environment. Now again, after landing jail, the story is not over. There also what he will do. That's his next environment. So this is how the karma is. A very simple understanding. So that means, what I want to say is that karma, understanding of the theory of karma was never to make life fatalistic. That something is going to happen only, so I resign. Anyway, it's going to happen. It's never like that. Life is always having choices in front of you. And those choices, when you do something, a new environment is created. That's how it is. Okay. So we just elaborate by saying that, I'm just going through some set of things to talk about environment, right? These are some, I'm just going very quickly over it. I don't have to explain anything. But these are all different environments in which people find themselves, right? Like if you see, there are several African countries, if you see, more than 30-40% of the people are, HIV infected. And most of the children that are born with HIV. When you're born in such an environment, it's just terrible to start with. Your life starts from a, extreme, how far are you going to go? So that environment kind of constrains you a little bit. Though still you can try to do many wonderful things, but still the environment is also important. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So basically, you can just, I'm just going through it very quickly in terms of, what all are different environment. There is just different environment. Yeah, so sometimes we also see, for example, another environment is that innocent children being killed. So this is again another reason why many people feel, where is the God in the picture at all? Because, there are world over so many, cases of, small children being murdered, killed. It happens everywhere actually. So these are some little ghastly slides, but so basically the whole question is, what is the law of karma compared to? The law of karma basically, so the whole question is, who is responsible? If you ask this question, who is responsible for, if you ask the question, who is responsible for the environment, the law of karma has the answer that the individual only is responsible for the environment. That's why I told you that the law of karma is entirely related to taking responsibility. I have only created. Now, most of us, we talk of, responsibility in this life, but the law of karma kind of traces a little back and also tries to say that your previous actions give rise to next action. So that's something that I want to clarify, because that's something that's a new concept, right? Because generally we are all used to that, at least we all theoretically know that if I study very hard, I'll get good grades, and if I just fool around, I will fail. So that everybody kind of intuitively understands in a very simple way as karma. But here the story becomes a little extra complex, because you are seeing the continuity of time over lives. You understood? That means previous life, next life, that kind of stuff. So that means when the soul leaves the body, he carries the karma with him, and he takes to the next environment, which is his new body, where there is a new set of environment or a situation. So this concept is a little new, because so this concept is understood only when someone at least theoretically understands what the soul is, because without that there is no question of karma going from one life to another. We just see it as terminating at death. At death everything is considered as finished, whereas here it's not like that. At death only the body is finished. It's the understanding here is that I am wearing a set of clothes. I change my clothes, but I am the same person. So if I have committed a murder today in this cloth, in another cloth, I am liable to be arrested. So that's the concept here. So you carry the baggage on ahead. So that's how the karma sees it. So the law of karma basically is compared to a judge. As in, this judge basically, just like a judge gives imprisonment to one party and also compensation to another party. Sometimes you see, the judge says that so is to be hanged to death, and another person is given 5 lakh compensation by the government because something injustice happened with him. This company created pollution in this area, all these people are suffering because of that. That company will pay this much money to everybody. Okay. But the thing is, the judge is not responsible for that. The individual is responsible. Okay. So the whole concept here is that even though what shall I say, the compensation or the punishment is awarded to him, the entity who awarded that compensation or punishment is not responsible for his enjoyment or suffering. He only is responsible, right? So, yeah. So why is he awarding different judgments? A simple thing, because people committed different acts. People commit different. So again, I just want to connect three things here, which I spoke of till now. So if you remember, we have spoken of the Atma or the soul, and then in our previous session, we also spoke about this entity called as Paramatma, who is nothing but, who is considered like a witness in the heart. And then there is environment or the world, where we actually live in. Okay, so the whole thing can be understood with a simple analogy, which I will use here. The analogy is that of a passenger, okay, a cab, and a driver. So the analogy is as simple as this. When a passenger calls for a car, you call for Uber car. So who calls for the car? You only call for the car. It's your desire to travel in the Uber from one point to another point. There's a driver who comes, he's simply asking you, where do you want to go? You say, I want to go to Pune station. He takes you there. And he bills you. You only pay the bill. You can't tell him that you also came with me to station, it should be 50-50. Right? I traveled to the station, even the driver traveled to the station. Usne bhi travel kiya na. He should also pay a little. He said, no, I didn't want to come. You wanted to come, so you pay for it. So it's something like that. So the passenger basically desires. He desires everything. He desires the fun or the enjoyment or whatever he is desiring. He is the person who is starting the chain of action. Okay. The driver over here, who is compared to the Paramatma, he is sanctioning it. He is allowing some things to happen. But even though he is allowing it, in this car of this world, the bill goes to him only. And that's the bill of karma, which basically the entity pays. So basically he pays for all his desires. So basically so for example, why does the passenger pay? Because he desired to go to the Pune station. No one else decided. He only wanted to go. So because he desired, so the driver who is there, he is basically facilitating. That means he's permitting actually, as in he is actually, allowing this fellow to go to the station. Even though he wants to go to the station, he cannot go until the driver permits. And the cab basically facilitates as in allows the journey to happen. Right? But the bill, it entirely is paid by the passenger. The passenger only owns the bill. The other two people don't own the bill. The owner of the car doesn't own the bill. And the driver also has nothing to do with the bill. The bill is paid by the passenger. So that's how karma is seen. Yeah, so now we'll just try to summarize the discussion till this point and take it ahead. So this is how the various things are. So the entity is the Atma in the material world, in a body, bound by the three modes, and time controls, and so basically, I just said it a little quickly. Yeah, so this fellow desires, this is the judge, who is the driver, these are all how it is being executed. It's a very simple summary of what we did. So, another example over here, the soul is compared to a customer who goes to a hotel, and the nature is compared to the waiter or the cook, and the judge is compared to a cashier. So ultimately, because of your desire to eat something, you pay a particular bill. So that's how it is. Okay, so now the question is actually, so what is karma? We have already decided. We have already discussed about it. As every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Newton's law is just a subset of the law of karma. So what Newton talks about is just one part of it. Okay, so now we will go into certain more detail. Okay. So actually I have only laid the background of this. I'll take questions. I know there would be questions, but I'll take questions after I've concluded at least a major part of what I want to cover, because until then questions will not make sense. because I'm yet to cover all the topics related to karma. I have only made the essential definitions. So, there are actually 3 types of karma that we talk of in the Karma Mimamsa. It's not just one type. So, normally the word karma basically means good actions. Now, what is good, what is bad, we will see very soon. That means anything where you depict a very noble quality is called as good karma, good action. Whereas the other opposite of this is in technical language called as vikarma. Vikarma basically means a bad action. What's bad as well, we will see that, and why it's called as bad. The third thing is called as akarma, and in Sanskrit when the prefix a is there, it basically means no karma. No karma as in no reaction. Okay, I'll give a very simple example to understand this. At least the difference between vikarma and akarma. Let us say there are some Indian soldiers, and we all know that recently our Indian soldiers did a surgical strike. Right? They went into the opposite country, and that's so amazing that our neighbor is denying that it ever happened. So it's very amazing because they're saying it never happened actually. They're saying that it never happened. It's all a lie. They actually killed 8 Indians. That's what they are saying. So anyway. So what I'm trying to tell you is the Indian soldiers crossed over, they shot all these terrorist camps and they came back. Now for this action, is there a reaction? As in, what I'm telling you, at least I'm saying from the country perspective. Suppose let us say the same soldier with the same gun, he goes home, he has a fight with his wife, he shoots her down. It's the same gun, it's the same man. But this action has a reaction. Right? The country hangs him for doing that. But the other action doesn't have that reaction. That's how karma sees it. It's not about the activity. It is about why you did it. Which distinguishes things as good, bad and non-reactionary. So this is a very deep concept. I'll give more examples as I go ahead. But I hope the example at least is clear here. Like a soldier who's shooting his wife and who's shooting the enemy who has come in, even though the action is the same, the result that he gets is different in both. Because his intention was different. He had a different intention in either place. Right? So let's be very clear on it. Good. So now the question is, how is generally good, bad and everything spoken of? Well, in a simple way, world over, there is an understanding of what it means to be good and what it means to be terrible or bad. Okay, so I'll just give some elaboration based on the theory of karma. So for example, karma glorifies 4 kind of qualities broadly. The Karma Mimamsa. It says these are 4 universal qualities which are always considered great. And if anybody does anything related to it, he is to be rewarded for it. Okay, so the quality number 1 which it talks of is mercy or compassion, which is considered an extremely noble quality. And if anybody displays it in any style or form, that's considered a good act which should get a reward. So there are many people who do so many things. Just like there was some couple of students who came to me 2 days back because I'm the head of IT department. They came and asked me that they want all the labs of IT. I said, why you want? They said, well, we want to, we are putting up some ad and getting some people who just do not know anything about computers and we want to teach them. And why are they doing that? They're just doing that out of, they're not getting any money or nobody's paying them anything. They're just doing it because they want to do. They just want to serve society. You understood? So any act of mercy and compassion is always considered as a good karma in general. And anything that violates it, so there are violations for each of it. The violation. So what are the others that? So the first one is mercy. I'll remove the word compassion. First one is mercy. The second one is truthful. So truth is considered by and large a very noble quality. The ability to stand for truth. That's what Satyam Satyameva Jayate, our one kind of slogan goes. Stand for the truth. And that's what in many ways Gandhi also stood for, standing for the truth. So that's considered very noble. And any act done in pursuance of the truth is considered great. Similarly, there's a whole list of that, but broadly speaking, there's mercy, there is truthfulness, and there is also, to be clean actually is considered great, and also to help in any kind of cleanliness. So for example, if you see people doing something for environment by growing trees, by cleaning the roads, by just ensuring that the water is clean, the food is clean, just even doing that much is considered a very positive karma. Because you are helping the world, because cleanliness actually maintains things. And we are talking about Swachha Bharat. So we really wish to have the whole thing clean again. So that's again considered a very noble action. The last one is a little bit difficult to comprehend, but that is actually called as austerity or tapasya. That means, to take some hardships in life. Why? Because if you want to achieve anything, you have to take some kind of a hardship, without which it doesn't come. Just like if you see Gandhi only, if you see the entire freedom struggle in India was centered around taking hardships. Somebody sacrifices by taking hardships. Somebody does some fast, somebody does something to protest. Somebody works towards that. If everybody wants to have a gala time, then the world just doesn't go ahead. Even a mother, for example, has to take a lot of hardship to raise a child. It's not a simple thing. To stay awake at night and feed the baby and clean all that stuff. It's considered austerity. It's considered painful. But until you pay the price, nothing good happens ahead. So these are considered 4 broad categories of noble qualities. Now, so the principle of karma is as simple as this. Anything that sustains these is considered good karma. Anybody that does anything where they help these 4 qualities to develop further in their life or in the society's life, they are considered to be generating good karma for themselves. And anybody who does activities where they are violating these activities, or they are making the world a little more terrible place to stay, that's considered as bad karma. So that's how the broad definition of the Karma Mimamsa is. Understood? So now you can go into and as far as karma is concerned, I'm not talking about that today. We'll talk on this when we talk on yoga. So we are not touching this. We're just talking about these two. So at this point, I want to take some of these examples, some of the things that actually go against it in general, the way. So of course, when we talk about mercy, truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity, everybody seems to like it. Everybody feels ye to bahut acha hi hai. There's absolutely no question. But the question is, what things in general go against it? How does the philosophy see that? That's what I want to start talking about a little bit. In fact, I will not be able to cover even all 4, but perhaps I'll just one. Let's see, if we have time, we will go into all the others. So there are certain activities which broadly violate these. Okay, we'll start with that. So there are certain things, that kind of violate these activities, which is why world over people see them as negative. So I'll take some simple examples first. So we see there are many things that could go against truthfulness, like corruption goes against truthfulness. Corruption goes against truthfulness. Right? Like if you see today, the corruption, many times we feel, only government officials are corrupt, this, that. It is actually not like that. Like I was reading a book recently by one Pune doctor. He says that the entire medical profession in so many ways is so rotten nowadays that if you go to any doctor for anything in your body, they will guide you to 10 people to do all these tests. Just because they get a cut commission from that. It's kind of now very much in the open, and even in very big hospitals, which I don't even want to take the name because I'm being recorded here by myself. But in many hospitals, like I'll tell you one example. This was one of my friends who's a doctor. Maybe I told this here, I don't know. But this fellow works in a hospital. So he took a new job in one very famous hospital in Pune. He told me himself. He's an MD medicine, very qualified guy. So because it was a new job, He went to the job the second day. His friend, another colleague was absent. So the colleague phoned and told him, "You please see my patients also." So he went and saw that fellow's patients. And when he saw the report, he thought that something is wrong. He just changed the medicine, and in one day, all these people were discharged. After 2 days, that fellow came back, the original doctor. He said that, "Where are my patients?" He said, "They're discharged." He said, "But why did you discharge them?" He said, "Because I changed the medicine." "Why did you change the medicine?" He said, "Because that was a wrong medicine." "I know that," he said, "but we have targets to keep people, when a patient comes, average how many days he must be in the hospital. Because there is money to be earned from it." He said, "Come on, what are you talking?" He said, "Yeah, that's how it is." You go and ask the boss. The boss said, "Yeah, see, all ethics and all put aside, still, we have to have money. We have made a big hospital. If everybody comes and goes away immediately in 1 hour, then who will lie in the bed? And if nobody lies in the bed, how will we, survive?" So they told him that at least for 2 days you have to admit a person if he has something. You should not immediately send him home like that. He said, "Boy, this is news." So, and this is not one odd example. If you actually go very deeply and talk to people, you understand that there's so many ways people do corruption and they're against truthfulness. So there are so many things that could be against truthfulness, but generally one thing that goes right against truthfulness, point blank against it, is to gamble. So gambling, if you see, that's why the whole Mahabharata story is centered around that gambling match. The whole idea is to say that this whole gambling is based on lie. Like, if you have in computer science, when you come to 3rd, 4th year, you study probability theory. And believe it or not, maximum applications of probability is with gambling. That's why, all the examples in probability are like this. 2 dice are thrown. You've read that thing, at least in your initial classes. The genesis of probability is gambling. Just like the genesis of cricket is betting. In case you knew about it, cricket, the mother ground of cricket is which stadium? The Lord's Stadium. Why is it called Lord's? Because all these zamindars would come and sit and see the match. Like Lord. Lord means somebody who owned a lot of land. Lords and the ladies, their wives. They would come and sit. And what would they do? They would bet on who will win. It started with that. That's the history of it. So, just like in America, there are 2 places very famous called Las Vegas and Monte Carlo, and many places are there which are big, big casinos. And in fact, in computer science, there are subjects. I myself teach Las Vegas algorithm, Monte Carlo algorithm. Yeah, there are algorithms to decide how probabilistically something will be achieved. Because all these casinos are actually programmed in a way that the casino owner only will make maximum money. He's not a fool to start a business like that. He's going to lose money. The whole thing is loaded against the customer client. It's a very simple thing. Right? The whole thing is falsity beneath it. That's why it's considered by not only the Indian philosophies, but world over, people generally view it as something very negative. So like that, there are several activities that go against each of it. I'll just take one example, which is very special to the Indian psyche in general, and I want to elaborate a little bit on that. And that is on killing of animals and the relation to that to mercy or compassion. Now, when you say mercy or compassion, as such, it's a very noble quality. But again, this is because of the philosophy. Because in the Indian system, every body is considered as a body where there is an Atma in it, a soul in it. There is this whole concept of reverence for all life, because of which you simply cannot exploit another person. You just cannot exploit another person. You cannot, not only a human being. If you see human exploitation, the biggest human exploitation in history ever was actually done by the Europeans. In the sense of, no, not World War, in the sense of the slavery, the capture of, the Negroes from Africa and taking them to America and South America. And, like if you see the stories of that, if you see the Incas, for example, the South Americans, when this Spanish people came in, they actually welcomed them. They didn't know who these guys are. They said, "Welcome to our country." They didn't even know their language. But these people just shot them all down straight. And similarly, that's what Christopher Columbus and his other followers did with the the Native Americans, killing them wholesale. And then after that, they made all rules. Every man is equal, and we should treat each other very nicely. But that was all later. That's after all the exploitation was done with. Okay, so basically in this context of exploitation, what role does actually killing of animals play? How it goes against mercy? That's a brief topic I want to touch before I come back to my slides. So I take a break from this session and go to another presentation, which I'll put in a minute. Yeah, so, hold on. So basically, I wish to talk on this topic very briefly though, and the connection of that to mercy or compassion in general. This is not generally a karmic theory, but I'm presenting this in a very different way actually. So the whole question is, the whole general idea is that we are what we eat basically. So I start with anatomy and some biology for a change. So I start with the human body actually. So basically what I have done is, we compare a human body with a herbivore. That means we compare a carnivore, a herbivore and a human on parameters. That's what we're doing. So I have taken parameters like facial muscles. If you see how it is in a carnivore, how it is in a herbivore, how it is in a human. That means we are just basically trying to see, first of all, in a very natural way, as far as nature is concerned, how are humans? Okay, so that's what we are first of all trying to see. You understand what is facial muscles, right? The muscles on the face. So this is reduced. So if you see a lion opening the mouth and a deer or a human opening the mouth, there is a difference. So here there is a wide mouth gap, whereas here it is very well developed. The facial muscles are very well developed in a human, because it doesn't really open big, That's the starting point. Jaw motion. In a carnivore, it is minimal side to side motion. Whereas in a herbivore and a human, it's a very good side-to-side motion. Incisors. In a carnivore, it's short and pointed. In a herbivore and a human, it's broad, flattened, and spade-shaped. The incisors. The canines are long, sharp, and curved. In a herbivore and a human, they are generally dull, short, and blunted. Molars. In a carnivore, the molars are sharp. Whereas in a human and herbivore, they are flat. Chewing. Carnivore doesn't chew. It swallows food whole. Whereas, you see a python, you see any animal, it's a carnivore, they swallow the food. A herbivore and a human have what you call as extensive chewing. In fact, for a human, it's said that most of your digestion happens in your saliva itself. Saliva. In a carnivore, it is acidic saliva. Carbohydrate digesting enzymes are not present, whereas in a herbivore and a human, the saliva is alkaline. Stomach acidity. In a carnivore, is less than pH 1. The reason it is less is because so that it can digest animal bone and muscle. Whereas in a human and a herbivore, the pH value of the stomach acidity is 4 to 5. The length of the small intestine. In a carnivore, it is 3 to 6 times the bodily length. In a herbivore and a human, it is more than 10 times the body length. Why it is like that? Because here it is small, so that it flushes out things very quickly. Whereas in a human, there is a very long chain that it goes through. The colon, again, in the carnivore is simple, short and smooth. Whereas in a herbivore and a human, it's long and complex. So this is basically simple anatomy we are talking about. Just to see naturally how things are. Perspiration. A carnivore has no skin pores. So it perspires through the tongue. Even you see a dog or any animal, it always puts its tongue out because it's perspiring through the tongue. Whereas a human and herbivore, basically, you don't see a deer or a cow with the tongue out. That's because they're perspiring through the body, like even humans. The nails are sharp here, flattened. Okay, so this is the first thing. Anatomically, we started with. Now we go to health issues. Let's look at the nutrition value of a vegetarian diet. So generally, the whole thing is it balanced? So a popular myth, I'm sorry, the myth is not clear. If I don't eat meat, I suffer lack of protein. That's the myth. Oh, it's clear. So we start with the animal world, that the elephant is powerful, but it doesn't. So basically, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, grains are certainly a source of proteins.
And I'll just show you some examples of very famous vegetarians world over. Start with Einstein, Newton, Gandhi, Socrates, Pythagoras, Leonardo da Vinci, even this guy. This fellow you may know. He was the Indian cricket coach 10 years ago during the time of Sourav Ganguly. Uska jhagda ho gaya uska. Greg Chappell. He was a very famous guy. Most of you may not know him, but he was the Olympic. He was like, I wouldn't say something like the Usain Bolt of my school days. You know, he won the 88, 92 Olympics, 100 meter, 200 meter, long jump. Carl Lewis, American sportsman. Edwin Moses, very famous. He is also he's not the world record holder. His world record recently it got broken, but previously was the world record holder. Even this lady, she's very famous, Martina. And the original McDonald, I mean the McDonald ka boss, is also vegetarian. So his quote is there: "I brainwash youngsters to doing wrong. I want to say sorry to children everywhere for selling out to concerns who make millions by murdering animals." The original Ronald McDonald, on quitting his job and becoming a vegetarian. Health reasons. So when we go to health, so heart disease, which is considered, like in European countries, I have taken data from Europe. India में data नहीं मिलता generally, मुश्किल है. I have taken European American data. Britain, it's responsible for 50% of deaths. As early as 1961, the Journal of American Medical Association had said 90 to 97% of heart disease is prevented by a vegetarian diet. What is the reason for that? The reason is very simple and scientific. Excess protein cannot be stored. They must be excreted through the kidneys, which is a very taxing process. Cancer. Cooked meat and fishes contains carcinogens which sometimes alter the cell's DNA or attack the DNA, alter it and develop cancer. Yeah, now you may say even plants contain. That's because of our modern day farming, where we have given up organic farming and we do all kind of pesticide based farming. Okay, leave it. So meat contains 14 times more chemicals and pesticides than plant foods. To compare. Yeah, so this is all the money involved and all that. Okay, now this is where karma comes actually. Many times we hear of this whole thing, that this world does not have enough overpopulation and shortage of food. That's the myth we want to talk of right now. With the world hunger, 20 million people die annually as a result of malnutrition. That's the statistics worldwide. And the UN Secretary General recently admitted in writing that meat consumption in rich countries is the key cause for hunger around the world. Why? This is the logic. In America and Western world, in the entire Western world actually, nowadays, what they basically do is, they have animal farming. So basically, they breed animals at a much quicker rate than they generally do, so they can kill them and they can eat their meat. So all the vegetarian food is fed to the animals and their flesh is fed to the humans. You understood that chain? And that chain is what I'm going to talk on. So 16 kg grain, if you have, for example, if you could directly feed 20 people, but on the other hand, you feed that to the cow, as in, because in America, for example, they kill at least about 1.5 lakh cows a day. So basically, so they actually breed cows at a much more quicker rate, right? That's called as factory farming. That's the technical name for it, factory farming. So all the vegetarian food is fed to the animals, which actually, so if you see America, the United States itself, they consume 50% of the world's resources, right? And 50% of world resources in everything, in food also. See, they import basically food from all these countries by paying money because they print dollars, right? The Fed prints dollars. They have the easy money policy. I'm not going to the economics. That's a whole different thing. But if you give it to the 1 kilo beef basically feeds 2 men. Yeah, so this is from a book called John Robbins. He has written a book, Diet for a New America. He says 80% of the corn and 95% of the oats grown in the US is eaten by livestock. Percentage of protein wasted in the cycling process is 90%. You understand? 90% is the thing. So 1 acre of land can produce 40,000 pounds of potatoes or 250 pounds of beef. And 56% of all US farmland is devoted to beef production. 100 million people could be fed if the land, using the land freed, if Americans reduce their intake of meat by 10%. That's from his book. It talks of, world hunger. So the reason he says an average American in 72 years consumes 11 cattle, 3 lambs, 23 hogs, 45 turkeys, 1,100 chickens and 862 pounds of fish. This is many other economic, like for example, environmentalists predict that by 2050, our oceans will be empty of all fisheries. The reason is, it is not that in previous days people would not eat fish. It's not like that. People were eating always, but not at the rate with which people nowadays do it. The rate of consumption is extremely high, and that's what kind of scales everything down in that favor. Right? So according to the Population Reference Bureau, if everyone adopted a vegetarian diet, current food production, what the world is producing currently, can adequately feed 10 billion people. And we don't have 10 billion people on the planet today. Okay. So next time we see such a child who is not getting food, we know why he is not getting in Africa food. He's not getting because somebody else has eaten his share up. And that's the theory of karma. When you have done something, that's why the Indian philosophy sees this against mercy. It's not just mercy to the animal, it's mercy to the human being and the environment also, without which it's unsustainable. That's the point here. Of course, cruelty is another totally different thing. Just like, for example, if you see hens in general, they're always packed tightly in a way that they cannot move an inch. Hens are forced to lay 200 to 220 eggs every year, leading to their weakened bones, feather loss. Male chicks are of no commercial value for the slaughterhouse, so they are either packed in garbage plastic bags to suffocate or thrown away in trash cans. And so the recent trend world over is to grind the main chicks alive and to use it as a high fertility manure for the farms. So that's a latest trend in poultry farming. As far as animals are concerned, again, like for example, the cow, I have a video which I'm not sure whether I should show you, but in case I decide to, basically if you see so for example, any animal, they want the skin as well for the leather. So what they basically do is, they have to pour boiling hot water. Why? Because hot water removes your skin out, right? Like we all know, if hot water falls on our body, our skin comes out. So that's the technique adopted. There is it's a factory system where the boiling hot water has to be poured on the animal so that the skin can be removed for the leather, and the blood can again be taken away for other uses, and then the meat can be produced. So that's how it is basically. In the US alone, 660,000 animals are killed every hour. The average per capita consumption is 200 pounds a year. Yeah, so the number of animals slaughtered every year in the world, any guess for what that figure would be? We cannot imagine. It's 24 billion. It's 4 times the human population every year being killed. That's the number of animals being slaughtered. I have some very interesting quotes from Americans only. William Ralph. We have enslaved the rest of animal creation and treated them so badly that if they were to form a religion, if all the animals decided, hamara ek dharma hoga, their devil would be the human. Okay, so these are some interesting pictures. This is Leonardo da Vinci, very famous guy, in case you know him or you don't know him. He says, truly man is a king of beasts, for his brutality exceeds theirs. George Bernard Shaw, he was another very famous British personality, vegetarian once again. While our bodies are the living graves of murdered animals, how can we expect any ideal conditions on earth? That was his quote on his. Leo Tolstoy, very famous again. Man suppresses in himself unnecessarily the highest spiritual capacity, that of sympathy and pity towards living creatures like himself, and by violating his own feelings becomes cruel. So basically, the underlying point where all these guys are talking about is the principle of karma that the Indian books talk of. And the principle of karma is that killing animals reduces respect for life, including humans. Because ultimately you are insensitive to blood. Right? So then there is blood. So Pythagoras, very old Greek man, he says, those who kill animals to eat their flesh tend to massacre their own. So that is basically the karmic concept. So basically, so that's how. So All the actions, including choice of food, have karmic consequences by inflicting injury, pain, and death. So that's the thing, basically. Quote from some very famous personality, Gandhi. I do feel that spiritual progress does demand at some stage that we should cease to kill our fellow creatures for satisfaction of our bodily wants. That's from Gandhi. This is from Einstein. Our task must be to widen our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures, including animals. This is Marco Ferrini. He's an Italian guy, famous again. Until he extends the circle of compassion to living beings, man will not find himself with peace. Thomas Edison. Non-violence leads to the highest ethics, which is the goal of all evolution. Until we stop harming all other living beings, we are still savages. So it goes on and on. Leo Tolstoy. I mean, I don't want to just. So basically, the whole point is world over. In fact, in America today, veganism and vegetarianism in general has picked up much more than what was previously known, because of various awareness and things like that. Because people were just not aware of certain things. But it's becoming quite fashionable world over. Like if you go to any corner of the world, if you say vegan food, people understand what you mean by that. Even in many airlines, they give an option. When I travel to Europe and many places, in the food column, you can tick a vegan. The vegan option has again become popular because of all this only. And, Of course, the Indian option doesn't talk of vegan because the Indian talks of vegetarianism, including milk from the cow. But the milk from the cow becomes dangerous when the cow is actually, kept as a commercial product. To just suck the milk and when it becomes old, kill it. So that kind of thing that's why never treated generally well in India. That's why this whole thing was there in India since 2 years about banning cow slaughter, which again became a very, very political thing and all that. But that's how it is. That's because many of the original breed, believe it or not, there are several breeds of cows in India. And many of them are actually under threat of extinction. Actually, you may feel that there are many cows, but it is not like that. The number of cows are actually very less. And in fact, that's why it's very surprising. I think I told this in this class, but I'm just making this point again, that I was going through this whole thing. 200 years back in India, it is said, in Maharashtra, Bengal, behind one man there were 20 cows. Cows means cows, calves, bulls, everything. Because they were required not only for the milk, but also for farming, for their dung and urine as fertilizer. Because otherwise now you have to use pesticide, which gives cancer. You know that now. 50 years back you didn't know it. We thought pesticide was great. Now everybody knows that it causes harmful effects. That's why people are dying of cancer. You understood? Whereas today in Maharashtra, Bengal, the ratio is for 20 humans there is one cow. So it's just reversed. It's basically 400 time difference. So obviously, you don't get good milk as well. And that's why many doctors also suggest not to drink, because the milk is highly adulterated. So you don't get it because nobody is taking care of it. Because but like our country, we have never bothered about taking care of farmers and all these people. We generally bothered only about IT engineers and all that stuff. Yeah, so basically food like grains, fruits, vegetables, basically that satisfies. So that's how it is. Okay, now one quick question obviously is that plants and trees also have souls. So what about that? Isn't eating them killing? So that's an interesting question, which perhaps could come over here. So that's again where we have to go back to the theory of karma. The theory of karma doesn't talk of life for life. It doesn't talk of eye for eye. It talks of pain for pain. That's the equation. That means the understanding is the pain caused is the pain returned. It's not just about life and life. So that's why there is a distinction between the life of different creatures. So if you compare plants and animals, it's a well-known fact even biologically that plants don't have a developed nervous system. And because they don't have a nervous system, the pain felt is extremely minuscule in compared to, that means there is a lot of difference between plucking a carrot from the ground and cutting the neck of a mammal. The mammal has a developed nervous system. It has pain as much as we do. The carrot doesn't feel the pain itself. So that's how nature is. So even though there is a killing involved, there is a violence involved in it. But it is so minimal that you just cannot even compare it. You cannot even compare it. Now I'll just end with this. So basically, because ultimately Jivo Jiva se Jivanam, because you can eat only living things. You can't eat dead things. You can't eat wood, for example. You have to eat something living. So the whole principle is minimizing violence. And this is another very interesting. That's once I think I mentioned in this class that Sanskrit is a very interesting language because the words convey the meaning. Similarly, this is one other interesting word. Like meat in Sanskrit is called as mamsaha. That's why in Hindi you call it as mas. It comes from the Sanskrit word mamsaha. And mamsaha, that word contains the philosophy. Mamsaha means I become you. Mam means me, saha means you. The whole understanding is because I kill an animal, I become that animal and get killed in future. That meaning is part of the word. The word elaborates the meaning. Because that's how Sanskrit is as a language. It encoded words with the meaning. So if anybody forgets any philosophy also, by looking at the word, just by analyzing it, they understand what is actually being said. Okay, so that's where, so mamsa bhakshanti amruta yasya. So this whole thing basically means the animal whose flesh I eat, potentially has a choice of eating me in the future. Because I pay that price back. I enter that environment with max. That's what I was saying earlier in terms of, action and consequence. So I think I end this slide and I go back to my original one now. I'll take questions in some time. Just hold on. Yeah, I'll take questions in some time. Just I have to complete some more stuff before I take questions. Yeah, so we are just coming back to our original point, of what was meant. Hold on. What was meant by karma and what was meant by vikarma. Any action that goes against it. Any action that goes against it. Another very modern example of something that goes against mercy, which is a very prominent thing in the world today, is abortion. Because from this perspective, there is life at conception. So basically, like if in the Indian government rule, till 20 weeks you can abort the baby. After 20 weeks you cannot. That's the Indian government rule. 40 weeks the baby stays in the womb of the mother, and in the first 20 you can knock it off anytime you wish to, but after 20 you cannot. Now this whole thing, that's why it's not only in India. This, even if you see in Europe and America, there are this pro-abortion and anti-abortion camps. Because the whole understanding is that the life is there in the womb. So you can't simply knock off. So that's considered, there's something called responsible sex. So when somebody fails to do that, the price for that is you raise a child. But then if you're not, so if you see, for example, in India and China especially, in the last few years, do you know that currently in India there are more children who are killed in the womb than they come out? Because if any woman visits a gynaec any time in life, when she misses her periods, the first question is, do you want the baby or you want me to kill it? That's the first question asked. The first question asked is abortion the option? Because that's the first thing that's asked actually. Because most people choose that only. Because the sex is very irresponsible. So it's just like you just casually do anything you want, and then finally you're not ready to pay a price for it. So you say that let's knock off the baby. Right? And especially in India, this whole thing is there of killing female children, which is another, killing male is also wrong, but then why selectively kill the female for all? It's just not, it just makes no sense. It's nowhere connected to your philosophy in any case, but that's how modern India is currently, where we are kind of facing real issues in life, and people still manage somehow. I know many people who, somehow, there are people who are so, because in previous times this problem was not there in one sense, because perhaps people had several children, so automatically if you had 4 kids, then 2 will be boys, 2 will be girls on an average, or 1, 3 or whatever. So you're happy with having boys and girls together. Nowadays, because they just have one, In China also there's a big problem, and that's why China abandoned their one-child policy. One-child policy failed because when they said one child, the Chinese couple wanted boy. So selective, so it seems, I read this in Time magazine. Time is a very famous magazine. It said that 40 million girls were aborted in the last some few years in China. Because couple can have only one child. So they all want a boy. For some reason. Everybody wants boy. What will those boys do? If only boys are there, all are going to be homosexual or what, that nobody really thinks about. But they all want a boy. Right? So that's how thought process is. Right? So they decide to knock off the girl. So that's another issue actually, which is there. So abortion is another very interesting thing because, so basically, it's not that just one activity could go against it. Anything could go against it. This depends. There's mercy to the environment also. How you use things. Like, I mean, a simple thing I'll tell you, why, for example, many environmentalists in India talk so strongly about the use of plastic. Actually, in our country, we have no regulations for anything. If you see in the Western world, you can't throw anything anywhere like that, litter. We are actually, in one sense, when I look at it, I many times feel that we are not meant for technology only. We just don't know how to use it. In the Western world, at least, even though they created all this technology, at least know how to use it. Of course, they do something like, I'll tell you this. You know this computers, people keep upgrading computer. What happens to old computer? Like computer monitor is made up of cadmium, lead, mercury, poisonous substances. You can't bury it. You can't burn it. You can't do. So what do they do? America has got two solutions. One solution is the cheap solution. Export it to some company in India or some like this country where there are no rules and regulations, where there are Indian business people who buy all this in ship from America, computers, old computer America, and just dump it on the road. Because here you can do anything you want, right? You can just take everything and put it on the road and that's it. Nobody will ask you anything. America, you cannot do that. So basically their kachara they export here, which our Indians buy. Business people, so-called business people, they import it. So there is a place in Chennai, I have the video of that, I'll show you sometime. It is just filled with mountain of electronic waste, which people have just imported from the US and just thrown it on the street outside. That's one option America has chosen. Second option is a costly option. They don't do it. But the second option they have decided is, if suppose countries like India and others don't import our kachara, we will put it in a rocket of $1 billion and put it in space. That means it's like, it's like a very sophisticated way of throwing the kachara outside the house. You just throw it outside the balcony. So throw it in space. So space may somebody will think about it. We don't have to bother about it. So, but they don't do it. That's a theoretical solution they have. They don't do it. Easy solution hai na? There are so many people who are ready to do such nonsense. So this is all what comes actually under violating each of it, which comes under Vikarma. You understood? So the Vikarma definition, so that's why the Vikarma is defined. Now, I'll tell you another very important thing before I go ahead. I had made this point earlier also, that it is not the action itself that decides it. It is an intention. Why you're doing it. So there is this whole thing in Ramayana, there is a conversation between Vishwamitra. So many times, many people have said that so many sages in India also eat meat. You have to actually read to understand why they did that. So there is this very interesting dialogue between Vishwamitra and his one friend. The story is that there was a 12-year drought in India in those times, because of which there was no food production. Drought, no water to drink literally. Because of continuous drought, there was no food. So Vishwamitra at one point of time in that story, he actually starts to eat meat. And that time only dogs are there. So he eats the meat of a dog, because that's the only thing that's available. Nothing else is there. So he's being asked a question. You're a sage. How can you eat the meat of a dog? So he says, try to understand, nothing is right or wrong absolutely. It all depends on the circumstance. You see the circumstance today. For 12 years, there has been no rain in this country. There's absolutely no food. And when it comes to that, when it comes to life and death, when it comes to, whether a human should live or a dog should live, only two options. You understood? That means there's only two options. You can't say that both should live. Either this human will live or this dog will live. If you're faced with such an option, then Vishwamitra says the human is more important. If such is the option, because a human can do many things with his life for the good of others, which this dog cannot. Understanding that, I choose this option right now, not under normal circumstances. So that's why, again, I had mentioned this point earlier also. It's not that anything is absolutely bad. It's never like that. Just a question of relativity. It just depends on the situation. What is it? Right? So just like, for example, abortion. It's sometimes possible that the woman's, sometimes, rarely it happens. There's just less than 0.1% of the cases of abortion. That if that lady keeps the child, then there is death to the lady. Means there is a threat to her life. Something very extraordinary. Then it's different. Then it's totally different. If you have an option between saving the woman who's standing in front of you and the child who is yet to be born, then obviously you give option to the person who is actually living. That's fine. That's a different thing totally. So that's why karma, vikarma is never absolute. That's why even truth, it's stupidity to think that always one should be truthful. That's another madness. Or compassion. That's why if you remember I told the story of Prithviraj Chauhan. He was thinking I should be compassionate to Muhammad Ghori, leaving him scot-free. His ministers told him, you are not to leave him. He is not a person to show compassion on. So compassion, even though it's a great quality, it's not a universal quality. That's why, nowadays this whole thing is there about how to treat, murder convicts. That's why, like, I remember last year when this Afzal Guru and all these other people, uska naam kya tha dusra, Tiger. Kaun sa Tiger tha wo? The fellow 1993 Bombay blast. Yaqub Memon. When he was hanged, my God, there are so many so-called liberal people who are objecting to that, saying that we should leave him. Somehow they've inherited the gene of a Prithviraj Chauhan, which is still alive in them. It's not very clear why. I mean, the guy has done what he has done. He's bombed and, played a role in killing 300 people. And now you're talking about compassion. This is what people have been talking about. So compassion is a fantastic quality. But where, how, that's the whole thing. That's what, is the discussion. That makes sense? So that's why it's never absolute. So mercy, for example, I was just saying any kind of killing in general, abortion, etc., as examples of things under normal circumstances that goes against mercy. Extraordinary circumstance, that's understandable. Absolutely no issue. But how many times it is extraordinary? That's the question. Is it an extraordinary thing that you had to kill the child or you had to kill an animal? It's not extraordinary. If it's normal, then that's different. So similarly, cleanliness. So there are certain things that go against these as well. So for example, I unfortunately don't have really time to elaborate this, but that's why, most religions world over see promiscuous, sexual activity, casual sex as something that goes against cleanliness. The reason it is like that is because sex as an energy has to be regulated by humans. When it is not, and one just, kind of indiscriminately engages in it without regulating oneself, then that is actually considered a source of uncleanliness, in the sense of uncleanliness of the mind. Where the uncleanliness actually begins, in terms of keeping the mind clean. That's why in the Indian system, this whole concept of brahmacharya was there. There was celibacy and control of the mind and senses. Because that is said to be the beginning of cleanliness. So that goes against it. And what goes against austerity, many things could go against it. Self-discipline. Intoxicants go against it. When you are intoxicated, you are completely lost. So these are some examples. Again, please remember, I will never say, because sometimes some intoxicant may be a medicine, then it is different. But how many times it's a medicine? That's the question really. What is the intention? Why is it being done? Right. Yeah, so that's how it is. So akarma, I will talk about it later. So now we will just, a little more into logic of karma before we end the session today. Yeah, so the logic of karma has many components to it. There are 7 points I have here. First is, all nature obeys laws. Humans are not an exception. So basically, just like, you jump, you break your legs. So even nature has its own set of laws, naturally. So the laws of karma is seen as an extension of the laws that we naturally know. Like you jump and you break your legs. So similarly, you do an act, an environment is created. And that environment is where you will decide what to do next, as I told later. So that's the chain of karma. Cause and effect, that's actually, right? Cause and effect is karma. So when you see an effect, we all inquire about the cause. Like the student is thinking in front of the test because he has not studied. Or someone has eaten wrong food, he has a stomach ache. So this cause and effect. We train our subordinates by reward and punishment. Right? Just like parents, teachers, even in office, if you do well, you get an extra increment. If you perform badly, then you're thrown off the job. So just like the world over, we train subordinates by what? Reward and punishment. And karma is like that. Based on what you have done, you get a good environment or a bad environment. Now the environment, what you will do, that's again up to you. So it's not fatalistic. Fatalism is totally different. Karma theory is not fatalistic. It just tells you that when you do something, you get an environment. Because you asked for that environment by your action. That's how it is. Yeah, now the obvious question is, why do the so-called bad guys flourish? So, you see, for example, somebody like Dawood Ibrahim, he's sitting in Pakistan, he's knocking off so many people, so many things he's doing, everything he does what goes against, good. But he's very happy, he's staying in a huge mansion in Karachi, very jolly. Nothing is happening in his life, wrong. So how do you see that? So the karma sees it as time basically. So basically there's one example given in the logic of karma of silo. I wonder if you understand what is a silo. If any of you are from the village, you would know that traditionally in India what they would do is when they would have a harvest of grains, they would put it in a silo. A silo is a big pot which opens from top and it opens from bottom as well. So you add new grain from the top and you take old grain from the bottom. So sometimes you may be adding bad quality rice on top because that's the harvest you got this year, but the last year's rice was good, so from down you get good rice. So somebody externally may think he's only adding bad rice but getting good rice. How is that? Well, it's just a matter of time. Perhaps he put some good rice before, so that's the good rice he's getting right now, but this bad rice will come soon. That's how it is seen as. Yeah, so now this is a very good question. Many people have this. Why does it take so much time to get this? Why doesn't things come immediately? There's no light? Okay. So why does somebody get something for so-called pre? Why not settle everything immediately? Well, so karma answers that, and Mahabharata answers that in a very beautiful discussion as well. Just like different seeds fructify after different time, different actions take different time to come. So just like simple example we give here, like ATM is like an instant karma, just to give a very big example. You put money, you get money. You put a check, you get after 5 days, 2-3 days, right? So just like seeds, you put a mustard seed, you get in 7 days the crop. You put a coconut seed, you will get in 10 years coconut. So different seeds take different time to fructify. So similarly, different actions take different time for the environment to happen. Now, of course, till now I know it's a little abstract. So I'll give an example. Yeah, so this simple example, this guy is teasing this girl in the lift, he gets instant karma, he gets a slap. Whereas somebody kills and he goes to the court, so there's a long time before he gets justice. Yeah, so so why doesn't karma come immediately? So there is a very beautiful conversation between Krishna and Dhritarashtra in the Mahabharata, and that will answer by and large. So Dhritarashtra, after the war is over and his 100 sons are dead, he's asking a question to Krishna, what karma did I do? Why did I have to see this environment? So Krishna says, well, 50 lifetimes back, that's how he starts the dialogue. 50 lifetimes back, you and Gandhari were again husband and wife. And what you did at that time is, there was this bird couple which had 100 birds. And for some perverted pleasure, sometimes people get perverted pleasure. You set fire to all these 100 birds, just for the fun, just to see how they die, how they are tortured and die. And because you gave the pain to that parent couple to see the death of the 100 birds, you have to also see the death of your sons. So then Dhritarashtra is asking an obvious question, why 50 lives for that? Why not immediately? So Krishna is answering, well, to get 100 children, also you need good karma. Because by definition, if I have to have 100 children, I have to be a very rich man. I have to be a big man in the world. A poverty-stricken fellow will not have 100 kids. So that means it's something like the court law. Suppose, I steal from someone and the court proves that, it is proved in the court that I stole from him. Court will say, return the money. If I say, no, I don't have anything, I'm bankrupt. Court will say, okay, right now you're bankrupt, okay. Whenever you get money, you have to give. So I have two options. Either I stay bankrupt all life or I give the money back. So it's something like that here. So to get 100 children and to raise them and to have that facility, you took 50 lives. But when you got, but again, please remember, Krishna says it is not that just because of that you lost your 100 children. Because of you killed those 100 children, you were in an environment where you were likely to lose 100 children. That environment was what? Being a blind king, attached to the sun, all that. But still in this life also you had an option to retract. See, please remember, that's what karma doesn't mean any previous action will automatically give you something. It's not like that. It puts you in an environment. And in that environment, if you again behave in a particular way, only it comes to you. If you reform, you can go back. But Krishna says you never had any intention to do so. You were just following the natural course of life. So it just acted on you. So that's how it talks about why. So something cannot just come immediately. So why are the ignorance punished? So another question is, what about ignorance? I don't know only. So ignorance is not considered any excuse. We're giving an example.
You go in a train, you enter first class bogie and say that I didn't know this is first class. So it is not like that. I mean, you better know. You're a human being. You came to the railway platform. You're not an animal that you walked in the first class by a second class ticket. So ignorance is not valid. Yeah, again, now this is the thing. 2-3 broad things. One is calamities in general. So natural calamity is again a very interesting thing. This is actually something called collective karma. There's something called collective karma as well. When a group of people decide to do something or have done similar things, they get similar reactions. I mean, you can see that in war happening. Like if you see the World War II, the Germans, they all followed Adolf Hitler's philosophy. What was Adolf's philosophy? Kill all the Jews. So everybody was going yes with it. So 6 million Jews were killed. And they always thought that we are winning. When did they know that they are losing? Only when the British and the Russians actually came into Germany and started raping all the women and killing people, the Germans understood we lost the war. Till then they never understood. Hitler had kept them under illusion that we are winning. So basically, that's collective karma. People share the whole thing. But even in that, it's something very amazing. I mean, I came across certain very amazing true stories, just 2 of them to share. There was this lady in Gujarat in 2001. So there was this earthquake in Gujarat, 26 Jan 2001. So many thousands of people died in it. So there was this mother who was breastfeeding her baby. So what happens is the column falls on the mother's head and she dies instantly. But because the child was on her breast, the child was getting milk. And the child was alive for 4 hours. And by the time the rescue team came, they saw a dead mother with a live child. I happened to meet this child actually. This boy is obviously 15, 16 year old. But very interesting story that, so there's some kind of a thing, even like, there's another interesting story that I came, true story again, tsunami. When the tsunami happened in 2007 or 8, whenever it happened, there were these divers, scuba divers, who entered the ocean before tsunami came, went in the ocean, and they came out after the tsunami had receded. Now the interesting thing is, had they gone late, tsunami would have knocked them, and had they come up when the tsunami is receding, then also they would have been dragged in. You understood, na? So somehow the timing had to be proper. They had to go in before tsunami coming, and they were inside. And they came out, they just saw there is no coast, because the coast was not there now, because tsunami had come and gone. So very interesting. So even in a natural calamity, it's not that everybody gets the same karma. People get different according to their own, circumstance. They get it. So similarly, even marriage is considered an example of collective karma. I don't have, unfortunately, the time to talk on it. That's why in India, the whole concept of astrology is to relate karma of the boy and girl, to see how it is, the karma. It's all about karma, environment. That means, is the man and the woman going to have a bad time at the same time? Bad environment? If it is, better they don't marry, because otherwise it's sure trouble. Things like that. Because there is a connection in that karma over there when they come together and they live in the same. Yeah, I think this is one of the last slides or a few things. So this is a very interesting dialogue between Dhritarashtra and Vidura. Again, going back to the Mahabharata, when Dhritarashtra is saying that whatever is my karma will happen. So if my sons have to die, they will die. That is destiny, he says. Vidura answers by this statement, which is very interesting. He says, destiny determines the consequence of our actions and not our actions. So what basically Vidur says is, destiny is a consequence of your action. It's not your action. So that's what I was saying, that even though Dhritarashtra had killed 100 birds before, and he was in a situation where he was liable to act in that way, he still had an option to reform. And karma gives that option. It's not that you have to pay for it. You may be put in a situation, if you're ready to improve, just like, a person is put in jail. Many times you see that if he behaves well in the jail, he's released early. You know that? Because the government says that he's already improved. Why to keep him in jail unnecessarily? Leave him out. The good behavior. On good behavior, they release. Like court has all kinds of things. They count 1 day and 1 night as 2 days. And they say that, okay, isko 12 saal kaid tha, lekin yes, he's a very nice fellow in the jail. So with all recommendation, he's set free. He's saying that, no, you're a good person now, you go out. So that's how the karma also works. Even if somebody has done something in the past. That's what Vidura and Krishna are always telling Dhritarashtra. It's not that you have to pay the karma. Your current action also decides majorly, because it's in your hand. And that's what we talk about. Destiny as a consequence of the action, not of the action. Right? So these are these 2 broad thought processes which are against karma. One is karmavad. Karmavad means everything is in my hand. There is nothing about what I have. And the second thing is, nothing is in my hand. So this fellow has gone to sleep in front of the computer. He's saying everything is in the hand of some providence. So these are two extremes. The karma understanding is environment is not in our hand, but my action is in my hand. That's how it is. I am put in certain conditions. I have a certain type of brain. I have a certain type of skill. I have a certain type of ability. I have a certain type of sudden opportunities coming in front of me. That's all by karma. But what I do in that situation is my next destiny. That's how it sees it. So the benefit basically is, I somehow don't have so much time for it, but basically from an individual perspective, it helps one make sense of the present condition and strength to face any situation, and that's about it, right? So it's basically, karma basically allows a person to understand that the human life is a place where you make a choice, and that right choice basically helps one get a better environment. That's in nutshell about, the theory of karma. Okay, thank you. Any questions before we end? We'll just take 5-10 minutes of questions and end. I know you're tired, but we'll just take some questions in.
Sir, when soul enters in our body, when we are sperms or when we are zygote or what?
I'll talk about that a little later. I'll take questions directly related to today's thing. We'll have very less time.
What happened to the souls when the whole earth dies because of the sun?
I'll take. Can anybody ask any question directly related to what I spoke today? There are answers for this. You come back to me later, because I'm having I just have 5-10 minutes, so I don't want to take.
It's not related to karma, but...
No, 1 second. Is there any question related to what we are talking
No,
today?
in the beginning of the session, you spoke about deism and theism.
Okay.
Artharash. So Artharash said that he wasn't, God wasn't responsible for